The air in the pediatric oncology wing of St. Jude's University Hospital smelled of three things: industrial-grade antiseptic, floor wax, and the metallic tang of quiet desperation. For Zora Washington, it mostly smelled like survival. Each sterile, ghost-white corridor, each cheerfully painted mural of a cartoon animal that failed to mask the sorrow beneath, was a station on the long, grueling road to keeping her son alive. She moved with an economy of motion honed by 4 years of walking these halls. Her hair, a cloud of tight dark coils, was pinned back severely under a disposable cap. Her blue scrubs, a size too large, hung on her frame, a uniform designed for invisibility. It was a costume she had perfected. Her hands, however, were where her true self resided. Long, elegant fingers, the color of rich mahogany, moved with a surgeon's precision and a dancer's grace. They were hands that could find a collapsed vein on a screaming toddler in near darkness, that could slide a needle in so smoothly the child barely whimpered. They were hands that betrayed a competence far beyond that of a simple phlebotomist. Her eyes missed nothing. They were the color of dark, rich coffee, watchful and deeply intelligent, cataloging the subtle shifts in the ward's atmosphere, the tightening of a nurse's shoulders, the forced brightness in a doctor's voice, the specific shade of gray on another parent's face that signaled bad news had been delivered. Today the air was tighter than usual. A ripple of anxiety, distinct from the everyday hum of medical fear, was spreading through the staff. Zora was in the waiting area, on her own time now, sitting with her children. Maya, her daughter, was a vibrant miniature version of herself, her hair braided with colorful beads that clicked softly as she drew in a coloring book. She was the light. Noah, her twin brother, was the reason they were here. He was pale, his skin possessing a translucent quality that terrified Zora. He leaned his head against her arm, his small body lacking the restless energy of a typical 5-year-old. He was the weight. The weight had a number: $247,000. The cost of the experimental gene therapy trial that was Noah's only real hope. A cost not covered by the hospital's charity care. A cost she was chipping away at with every double shift, every overtime hour, every single drop of blood she drew. That number was a cage, and this hospital was both its bars and the key. It was why she tolerated the condescending doctors, the overworked and snapping nurses, the profound loneliness of being a ghost in the machine that held her son's life in its gears. She had once commanded rooms where millions of dollars were discussed. Now she was praying to make it through the month, a life ago. "Attention all B-Wing staff," a voice crackled over a nearby nurse's walkie-talkie, sharp with panic. It was Mrs. Gable, the unit administrator, a woman whose entire posture was a cringe. "VIP arrival. I repeat, VIP arrival. Chairman CEO's party is en route to the penthouse suite. All non-essential personnel clear the main corridor. I want it sterile, people. Sterile." A frantic energy seized the floor. Nurses smoothed their uniforms. Orderlies began wiping down surfaces that were already gleaming. Zora felt the shift and instinctively drew her children closer. She knew what this meant. It meant a disruption in the fragile ecosystem of the ward. It meant resources being diverted. It meant a powerful, wealthy family treating the hospital like a private hotel, and the staff like their personal servants. She saw them before they were fully visible, their arrival preceded by a wave of silence that rolled down the long hallway. First came the men in dark, impeccably tailored suits. They moved as a single unit, their faces blank, their eyes scanning everything and seeing nothing. They were wolves in a sheep pen, and the entire hospital staff seemed to collectively hold its breath, recognizing the scent of a predator. Then he appeared, and the air in Zora's lungs turned to glass. Quan Jiong. He moved with a predatory grace, a contained power that seemed to warp the space around him. His suit was a deep charcoal gray, the kind of bespoke tailoring that whispered its cost rather than shouting it. On his wrist was a Patek Philippe Grand. Complications, a watch she knew, with a sickening lurch in her stomach, was worth more than Noah's entire treatment. His hair was jet black, styled with a casual precision. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. They were as cold and calculating as she remembered, eyes that could assess a business rival's weakness, or a lover's desire with the same detached intensity. He was not her Jiang anymore. He was Chairman Quan, the formidable head of the Dragonhead Syndicate, His corporation a gleaming, legitimate skyscraper built on a foundation of shadows and blood. And he was not alone. On his arm was Choi Seo-yeon. She was exquisitely beautiful, a perfect porcelain doll with a heart of ice. Her dress was a sliver of white silk, her jewelry a constellation of diamonds that caught the harsh hospital light and threw it back, weaponized. She was the daughter of Chairman Choi of the White Tigers, a rival syndicate. Their engagement was a treaty, a merger of power that had been the talk of Seoul's underworld. Zora's training, the deep instinctual discipline forged in a life she had long since buried, took over. She made herself smaller, tucking her chin, turning her body slightly to shield her children from his line of sight. Become invisible. It was the first rule of survival she had ever learned. For 4 years, she had been a ghost. She just needed to remain one for 30 more seconds. But fate, or whatever cruel force governed their universe, had other plans. One of Ji-young's men, Walking Point, stopped to speak to the trembling Mrs. Gable. The entire procession halted. And in that frozen moment, Kwon Ji-young's cold, sweeping gaze, which had been dismissing the entire floor as irrelevant scenery, snagged on her. For a single silent beat, there was nothing. Just the sterile hum of the hospital. Then, recognition flickered in his eyes. A barely perceptible widening, a crack in the marble facade. His gaze dropped from her face to the 2 small children beside her, to Maya, with her bright, curious eyes, to Noah, pale and fragile, with his father's exact mouth and stubbornly proud jawline. Kwon Ji-young, the man who did not flinch when a rival pulled a gun, the man who could watch a company burn to the ground without a change in his expression, went pale. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy, shocked pallor. It was the most emotion she had seen on his face in 5 years, and it was terror. Seo-yeon, attuned to his every micro-expression, followed his gaze. Her perfectly sculpted smile didn't falter, but her eyes, when they landed on Zora, turned to chips of obsidian. She saw Zora not as a person, but as a stain. A black woman in cheap scrubs with 2 children who had, somehow, momentarily broken the composure of her powerful fiancé. And in that instant, with the chilling certainty of a gazelle spotting a lioness, Zora knew she had just become prey. The humiliation was coming. It always did. The only question was its form. The first attack was subtle, a demonstration of power for an audience of 1, Ji-young. Zora was called to the penthouse suite. The official reason was that Chairman Seo-yeon's father, a man whose body was failing as fast as his shipping empire, required a blood draw, and Zora was, by reputation, the best. The real reason was standing by the window, a vision in cream-colored cashmere, when Zora entered. "Ah, you're the one." Seo-yeon's voice was musical, but with an underlying dissonance. She spoke in English for the benefit of the nervous American nurse hovering by the door. "My father is a very important man. His veins are delicate. I trust your hands are clean." Zora's face remained a neutral mask. "Yes, ma'am." She began setting up her station with practiced efficiency, laying out a sterile pad, tourniquet, needles, and vials. The room was opulent, a stark contrast to the functional despair of the lower floors. It smelled of expensive floral arrangements and old money. Ji-young was there, standing in the corner, rigid and silent. He had not looked at Zora since she entered, his focus fixed on a point on the far wall. He was a statue carved from tension. Chairman Seo was propped up in the hospital bed, a shrunken, sallow figure lost in a sea of silk pillows. He grunted, waving a dismissive hand. Seo-yeon switched to Korean, her tone becoming sharper, more condescending. The language switch was a deliberate exclusion, a way to reduce Zora to a piece of furniture that couldn't understand. "Father, this is the woman Ji-young-si was staring at. Can you believe it? She looks like she barely knows how to hold a needle. Probably got the job through some charity program. Make sure you watch her. These people can be so clumsy." The slur was casual, woven into the sentence with practiced ease, a racial epithet that made Zora's blood run cold. Zora didn't flinch. Her hands remained steady as she prepped the chairman's arm, her touch gentle. She could feel Ji-young's gaze on her now, heavy and suffocating. She refused to look at him. She focused on the job, on the fragile, paper-thin skin of the old man's arm. Survival. For Noah. "Honestly," Seo-yeon continued, her voice rising with performative disgust. "I don't know why this hospital employs them. It's unhygienic. Look at her hair. It's so wild. Jiong-si, don't you agree?" It lowers the tone of the entire establishment. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a challenge thrown down in a royal court. Jiong's jaw was a hard, unforgiving line. Zora found the vein on the first try, a perfect rolling vessel. She slid the needle in, smooth, effortless. The dark red blood began to fill the first vial. Seo Yon, irritated by Jiong's silence, took a step closer. "Be careful," she snapped, again in Korean. "That's my father. If you hurt him—" As Zora reached to switch to the second vial, Seo Yon's hand shot out, ostensibly to adjust her father's pillow. Her elbow connected squarely with Zora's tray. The clang of metal on the polished floor was shockingly loud. Vials scattered. A sterile saline flush syringe rolled under the bed. It was a calculated act of sabotage, designed to make her look incompetent. Mrs. Gable, who had personally escorted Zora up, gasped from the doorway. Zora froze for a single second. The blood in her veins felt like ice. This was the moment, the pivot point. She could apologize, grovel, clean up the mess, and accept the humiliation. That was the path of survival. That was the path for Noah. But as she looked at the scattered vials, she thought of Noah's own blood, drawn so carefully for the trial coordinators. She thought of how a contaminated sample, a delay, could jeopardize his place. Seo Yan hadn't just attacked her dignity, she had, however indirectly, attacked her son. 3 seconds. That's all it was. 3 seconds where she weighed her son's life against her own soul. 3 seconds where the ghost of the woman she used to be rose up, choking on the dust of subservience. 3 seconds where she made a decision. She didn't grovel. She didn't even look at the mess on the floor. She calmly finished the draw, securing the final vial of blood she needed. She carefully removed the needle from the chairman's arm, applied pressure with a cotton ball, and taped it with practiced ease. Only then did she straighten up. Her posture shifted. It was a minute change, but the effect was seismic. Her spine went from the weary curve of a servant to the rigid ramrod of a soldier, her shoulders squared, and she lifted her head, her eyes, no longer deferential, meeting Seo Yan's with a direct, unblinking challenge. "The samples are secure," Zora said, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of command. She spoke in English for the benefit of the room. "I will have them sent to the lab immediately." She turned to leave, deliberately stepping over the mess on the floor as if it were beneath her notice. "Clean that up," Seo Yan snarled, her face a mask of fury. "That is your job." Zora stopped at the door but didn't turn around. "No," she said, her voice as cold as steel. "My job is to draw blood. Your mess is your own." She walked out of the room, leaving a stunned, vibrating silence in her wake. She could feel Jiong's eyes burning into her back. The war had begun. The retaliation was swift and cruel. The next afternoon, Zora received a call from the trial coordinator for Noah's gene therapy. There was a problem. An anonymous complaint had been filed regarding Zora's professional conduct. The hospital's ethics board was launching a formal review. Until it was resolved, Noah's position in the trial was suspended. Suspended. The word was a physical blow. It knocked the air from her lungs, leaving her gasping in the empty hallway outside the lab. It was a death sentence delivered by bureaucracy. Seo Yan hadn't just spilled a tray. She had taken a scalpel to the single thread of hope holding Zora's world together. This was the line, the final boundary. Her dignity was a luxury she could sacrifice. Her son's life was not. The ghost of the woman she was rose again, and this time it would not be silenced. She spent an hour making calls, pulling on threads she hadn't touched in 5 years. Old markers, old debts from a world Jiong thought she had only ever brushed up against. She had not been a simple civilian caught in his orbit. She had been born in it. The adopted daughter of Old Man Kang of Incheon, a gruff, honorable monster who had found a lost black American child on his doorstep, and, for reasons of his own, raised her as his. He had taught her the language, not just the polite Seoul dialect, but the guttural, expressive Busan Saturi of his youth. He had taught her the codes, the hierarchies, the art of seeing the power behind the power. He had sent her to the best schools, not to be a lady, but to be a weapon, an analyst, a strategist. She had walked away from it all when she found out she was pregnant, desperate to give her children a life free from that shadow. She had walked away from Jiong, telling him she couldn't handle his world, a lie that had allowed him to let her go. It was a lie that had just expired. She requested a formal meeting with Chairman Seo to offer her official apology for the incident. His office, a grand wood-paneled affair, was thick with the scent of leather and intimidation. Chairman Seo sat behind a massive desk. Seo Yan stood beside him, a smug, triumphant smirk on her face. And Jiong was there again, a thundercloud of a man, his presence filling the room with unspoken questions. Mrs. Gable scurried in behind Zora, wringing her hands. "Chairman Seo, Ms. Washington is very sorry for her unprofessionalism." Seo Yan cut her off with a wave of her hand, dismissing the administrator like a fly. She turned to Zora, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness. She spoke in Korean. "So, the little mouse has come to beg. I heard about your son. Such a shame. A spot in that trial is so hard to get, and even harder to keep. Perhaps if you show the proper remorse, get on your knees and clean my shoes for a start, I might be persuaded to speak to the board on your behalf." Jiong took a half step forward, a low growl rumbling in his chest, but Zora gave a nearly imperceptible shake of her head. This was her fight. She stood perfectly still. The room seemed to hold its breath. For 5 seconds, she said nothing. 5 seconds where she shed the skin of Zora, the phlebotomist. 5 seconds where she let the daughter of Kang of Incheon look out through her eyes. 5 seconds where she chose her weapon. She bowed. A perfect formal 90-degree bow, not to Seo Yan, but to Chairman Seo. When she straightened, the mask of the deferential servant was gone, replaced by an expression of cold, aristocratic calm. She began to speak. Her Korean was flawless, the formal, honorific-laden language of the old guard, but it was laced with the distinct, rough-edged consonants of the Busan dialect. It was the language of dockside deals and backroom wars, a language Chairman Seo had not likely heard in this sterile, corporate environment in 30 years. "Seo Diepionim," she began, addressing the chairman with a title of respect, so formal it was almost archaic. "I have not come to beg. I have come to offer a warning as a matter of honor between houses." Chairman Seo, who had been looking bored, stiffened. His eyes narrowed. Jiong went utterly still, his head tilting as he processed the sound, the dialect, the sheer impossibility of it. Seo Yan's smirk faltered. "What is this nonsense? What are you saying?" Zora ignored her, her gaze locked on the old man. "My foster father, Kang Jin Cheol of Incheon, always taught me that a desperate dog bites its own master. Your house, Daepyeonim, is filled with desperate dogs." The name landed in the room like a grenade. Kang Jin Cheol, Old Man Kang, a legend. A kingmaker from the old generation, a man whose honor and brutality were spoken of in equal, hushed tones. Chairman Seo's face, already sallow, turned the color of ash. You are Kang's," he stammered, his voice a dry rasp. "I am," Zora confirmed, her voice deadly quiet. She switched to the specific slang of the Jopak, the criminal underworld. "And he also taught me about the Incheon Accords of '98. The agreement your father made with mine regarding the trafficking of persons. An agreement your organization seems to have forgotten, specifically the clauses regarding the use of medical facilities as cover." Sao Yon stared, horrified, her brain unable to compute. "What are you talking about? Who are you?" Zora finally turned her gaze to the younger woman. The look in her eyes was one of profound, dismissive pity. "Just a phlebotomist," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "With good ears." She turned and walked out of the room, the click of her sensible shoes on the marble floor sounding like gunshots in the deafening silence she left behind. He found her 2 hours later in the hospital chapel. It was the one place she felt she could breathe, a small, quiet space that smelled of old wood and candle wax. She was sitting in a back pew, not praying, just thinking, planning. The board had already called. The review was canceled. Noah's spot was secure. It was a victory, but she knew it was only the opening salvo. The heavy oak door opened, and Jiong stepped inside. He didn't look like a CEO or a mafia boss. He just looked like a man adrift in a storm. He sat in the pew across the aisle from her, leaving a chasm of empty space between them. For a long time, he said nothing. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy with 5 years of unsaid words, of lies and truths, and the ghosts of what might have been. Kang Jin Cheol, he finally said, his voice rough. He raised you. It wasn't a question. He took me in, Zora corrected softly. I was 7. My parents were aid workers. A car accident outside Incheon. He found me. And you never told me. The accusation was soft, but it held the weight of a profound betrayal. You were the heir to the dragon head. I was the daughter of a rival power, even if he was semi-retired, she stated, matter-of-factly. Telling you would have been a political act, a declaration. I didn't want that. I wanted you. The admission hung in the air between them, fragile and painful. When I found out I was pregnant, I knew I couldn't raise our children in that world, so I ran. I created a story you could accept, that I was weak, that I was scared. It was easier for you to let a civilian go. He flinched, the truth of her words hitting him. He had believed it because it fed his ego, his belief that his world was too harsh for someone like her. The boy, Noah, he said, his voice cracking on the name. He is mine. They both are, she confirmed. Maya too. He closed his eyes, a wave of pain washing over his face. Why didn't you tell me, Zora? Why go through all this alone? Because coming to you would have meant bringing them into this. She swept a hand, indicating not the chapel, but the entire world of shadows they inhabited. The world I ran from. I wanted them to be normal, to be safe. Her voice broke. But his sickness, it dragged us back to the edge of your world. And your fiancé, she just pushed us in. He was silent for another minute, absorbing the immensity of it all. The children he never knew he had. The woman he thought he knew, revealed as someone else entirely. The danger his own alliance had placed them in. When he spoke again, the pain was gone, replaced by the cold, practical authority she knew so well. It was the voice of Chairman Kwan. Seo Yan will not stop. Her father's organization is weaker than it appears. This alliance with my family is all that's propping them up. She sees you and the children as a threat to that. She will escalate. I know, Zora said. She already has. I can protect you, he stated. Security, a safe house, money, anything. This was the moment, the offer of rescue, the classic dynamic. But Zora was not a damsel. She was a queen who had been living in exile. She met his gaze, her own eyes clear and hard. I don't need a protector, Ji-young. I need a partner. I don't need you to solve this for me. I need you to give me the tools to solve it myself. He blinked, taken aback. What do you mean? The White Tigers are desperate, she explained, her voice dropping into the cool, analytical tone of the strategist she was trained to be. My father taught me to read the patterns. Their shipping routes are being squeezed by Chinese triads. Their political connections are retiring. This human trafficking operation you heard me mention, it's not just greed, it's life support. They're using this hospital, its international patient services, as a pipeline, and I think it's bigger than even Chairman Seo knows. I think Seo Yon is running it. Ji-young's eyes narrowed. What do you need? The question was the same, but the context had shifted. It was no longer an offer of charity. It was a query between equals. Access, she said. Your best hacker. Full access to the Dragonhead's intelligence network. A secure location with a hardline connection. And a ghost payroll account. I'm going to dismantle her entire operation from the inside out. I'm going to take away her money, her power, and her father's respect. I'm going to leave her with nothing, but I will do it my way. Surgically, quietly, no gang war that could put my children in the crossfire. He stared at her, a new kind of awe dawning in his eyes. He wasn't looking at his timid ex-girlfriend. He was looking at a warrior. He saw the daughter of Kang Jin Cheol, and for the first time, he understood the gift he had so carelessly let go. Done, he said, his voice absolute. He stood up. My head of security will escort you and the children from the hospital tonight. A car will be waiting. It will take you to a penthouse I keep. It's secure. Everything you asked for will be there. As he turned to leave, Zora's voice stopped him. Ji-young. He paused at the door. Thank you, she said softly. It wasn't for the resources, it was for the recognition. He gave a single sharp nod. The partnership was sealed. The war room was open. The penthouse was a fortress in the sky, all glass and steel and biometric security. It overlooked the Han River, a glittering panorama of a city Zora had once called home. But she paid no mind to the view. For the next 2 weeks, the living room became her command center. Ji-young's top cybersecurity expert, a quiet man named Min, worked silently at a bank of monitors, a ghost in the machine at her command. Zora was relentless. She slept in 4-hour shifts, fueled by coffee and a cold, burning rage. The skills old man Kong had drilled into her came rushing back. She wasn't just looking at data, she was seeing the story beneath it. Shipping manifests that didn't match cargo weights, invoices for medical supplies from shell corporations, the digital ghosts of patients who were checked into the hospital's international wing, but never seemed to receive treatment. She found the rot. It was deeper and more depraved than she had imagined. The White Tigers were using the hospital as the final laundering point in a human trafficking pipeline that stretched from Southeast Asia. They would bring people in under the guise of medical tourism, create false patient files, then funnel them into the city's underworld of sweatshops and brothels. Seo Yan wasn't just complicit, she was the architect. She had modernized her father's brutish operation into a sleek, high-tech machine, using the veneer of legitimate healthcare to hide unimaginable cruelty. Ji-young would visit every night. He never asked about her progress. He would simply appear, bring her food, real food, samgyeopsal and pungent jjigae that reminded her of a life before hospitals, and watch her work. He'd watch her pace the floor, speaking in rapid-fire Korean to Min, connecting disparate pieces of information with intuitive leaps that left his own expert staring in amazement. He was watching a master at her craft. He saw the woman he had underestimated, and the respect in his eyes was a palpable force. One evening, Zora uncovered a critical vulnerability. The entire operation was run through a single, encrypted server located not in some high-tech bunker, but in the hospital's own administrative archives. To gain full access, they needed to plant a physical keylogger, a job that couldn't be done remotely. "I'll send my men," Ji-young said immediately. "No," Zora countered, not looking up from a blueprint of the hospital she had spread across the floor. "They'll be noticed. Security in that wing is loyal to Seo's family. They'll be looking for men in suits. They won't be looking for a cleaner." "Zora, it's too dangerous." "I know every service corridor, every blind spot in that building, Ji-young. I've spent 4 years walking them. I can get in and out in under 10 minutes. She finally looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "This has to be me." It was the first time she had directly overruled him. He studied her face, saw the absolute certainty there, and gave a reluctant nod. He was providing the platform, but she was running the operation. The next night, dressed in the faded gray uniform of the hospital's janitorial staff, Zora became a ghost again. But this time, it was a ghost with a purpose. She moved through the darkened hallways with a familiarity that was bone deep, her supply cart a perfect piece of camouflage. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands were steady. She reached the archives, bypassed the simple lock with a tool from her cart, and found the server. In 30 seconds, the tiny device was planted. As she turned to leave, she heard voices from the adjoining office. Seo Yan's, sharp and angry, and another man's. She pressed her ear to the door. "The board folded too easily," Seo Yan was saying. "He's involved. Ji-young is protecting her. This changes things. We need more leverage." "What do you suggest?" the man asked. "The old man," Seo Yan's voice was venomous. "Ji-young's father. He's visiting the cardiac wing tomorrow for his annual checkup. An unfortunate complication. A potassium chloride injection, untraceable. It will look like a heart attack. Ji-young will be too busy grieving to pay attention to some hospital charity case, and he will be reminded of what happens when a deal between our families is threatened." Zora's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about her anymore. Seo Yan was willing to kill the patriarch of the Dragonhead Syndicate to maintain her position. It was an act of suicidal desperation. She didn't run. She didn't panic. She calmly wheeled her cart out of the corridor and back to the secure penthouse. She had the keylogger in place, and now she had something more. She had Seo Yan's endgame. When she told Ji-young, his face became a mask of cold fury. A dangerous light flickered in his eyes, the predatory stillness of a tiger about to strike. "I'll kill her," he whispered, his voice deadly quiet. I will burn their entire family to the ground." "No," Zora said, grabbing his arm. Her touch was firm, grounding. "That's what she wants. A war, chaos. You do that, and you prove you're nothing but the monster she thinks you are. We are going to do this my way. We are going to take everything from her without firing a single shot." "She threatened my father, Zora." "And we are going to use that to destroy her," Zora insisted, her eyes boring into his. "I have a plan, but you have to trust me. You have to let me lead." He stared at her, his internal battle raging. The code of his world demanded blood for blood. But Zora was offering something else, not just revenge, justice. He looked at this incredible woman who had endured so much, who was fighting not just for her own child, but for his father, for the soul of his entire organization. And he made a choice. He chose her. "What's the plan?" he asked, deferring to her command. The annual St. Jude's Charity Gala was the crown jewel of the city's social calendar. It was a night of performative philanthropy, where the city's elite gathered to congratulate themselves on their generosity. This year, the guests of honor were Chairman Seo and his daughter, Choi Seo-yeon, celebrating their family's transformative donation to the new international wing, the very wing that served as the hub for their trafficking operation. Seo-yeon was radiant. She stood in the grand ballroom, a confection of couture chiffon and glittering diamonds, accepting praise with a serene smile. She had never felt more powerful. The plan to deal with Ji-young's father was in motion. The annoying phlebotomist and her inconvenient children would soon be a distant memory. She had won. Then she saw her. Zora entered the ballroom, not through a service entrance, but through the main archway. She wore a simple, elegant gown of deep sapphire silk that clung to her frame, showcasing a strength and grace the baggy scrubs had hidden. Her hair was not pinned back, but flowed freely, a dark, glorious halo around her head. She wore no jewelry save for a pair of simple pearl earrings. She didn't need it. Her presence was the only adornment required. She was not alone. Flanking her were two of Ji-young's most senior and feared lieutenants, their dark suits a stark contrast to Zora's vibrant dress. They moved with her, their deference and respect for her clear in every step. They were not her guards. They were her honor guard. Across the crowded ballroom, Seo-yeon's eyes met Zora's. The smug smile on her face froze, then shattered. The blood drained from her face, leaving a sickly pale mask of disbelief and terror. It was the exact mirror image of Ji-young's reaction in the hospital corridor weeks ago. The invisible woman, the stain, was here, in the heart of her triumph, looking like a queen. Zora didn't smile. She simply held Seo-yeon's gaze for a long moment before giving a small, almost imperceptible nod. The message was clear. "I'm here. It's over." Ji-young materialized at Chairman Seo's side. "Chairman," his voice was lethally polite, "there is a private matter we must discuss. Now." The private room was a study in mahogany and dread. Chairman Seo sat, blustering, demanding to know the meaning of this interruption. Seo-yeon stood beside him, trembling, her bravado gone. Ji-young stood by the door, a silent, imposing guard. The door opened, and Zora walked in. "You," Chairman Seo spat, recognizing her. "The girl who claims Kang's patronage. What is this?" Zora didn't address him. She walked calmly to the center of the room, her gaze fixed on Seo-yeon. "The plan to murder Chairman Kwon was foolish, Seo-yeon," Zora began, her voice calm and even. "Desperate. My father taught me that desperation is a tell. It means the foundation is cracked, so I looked for the cracks." She placed a slim tablet on the table. She didn't play a video or show a spreadsheet. She didn't need to. This was not a corporate presentation. This was a tribal reckoning. She began to speak, switching back to the guttural Busan dialect, a language of pure power in this context. She spoke to Chairman Seo, but her words were daggers aimed at his daughter. "I know about the shell company, Morning Light Medical," she said, naming the front. "I know about the falsified patient records for the 214 people who have been funneled through your new wing in the past year. People from the Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand. People whose digital ghosts I now control." Chairman Seo's face was turning a mottled purple. "And I know about the 3 offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands where the profits are laundered," Zora continued, her voice relentless. She named the account numbers from memory. Accounts that your own chief financial officer gave me the keys to this morning in exchange for his own family's safety. She finally turned to Seo Yon, whose face had crumpled into a mask of pure horror. You betrayed your own people, Seo Yon. You got sloppy. You built an empire on your father's name, but you did it with none of his honor. You left a trail, and I followed it. Lies! Seo Yan shrieked, her voice cracking. She's lying! Father, she's nobody! She is the daughter of Kang Jin Cheol, Jiyoung's voice cut through the air, cold as a tombstone. And she speaks with his authority, and mine. That was it, the final blow, the public declaration of alliance. Ezio Yan stared at him, at the man she was supposed to marry, and saw nothing but cold contempt. In a final hysterical act, she lunged, not at Jiyoung, but at Zora, her hands clawed, a wild scream tearing from her throat. Zora didn't move. She didn't even flinch. She stood her ground, a pillar of absolute stillness, watching the attack come. Jiyoung's men moved to intercept, but it was her calm that dominated the room, that rendered the violence pathetic and meaningless. They stopped Seo Yon inches from her face. Zora looked into the ruined, hate-filled eyes of the woman who had tried to destroy her. "It's over," she said. And it was. Chairman Seo, his legacy in ashes, his name disgraced, looked at his daughter with dead eyes. He had been outmaneuvered, his entire organization dismantled not by a rival army, but by the quiet, brilliant work of one woman his daughter had been too arrogant to see. He turned his back on her, a silent, damning act of disownment. The authorities, acting on an anonymous tip backed by impeccably organized data, arrived 20 minutes later. They were the cleanup crew. The war was already won, 6 months later. The view from the 40th floor corner office was spectacular. The Han River was a silver ribbon winding through the heart of Seoul. Zora Washington, however, was focused on the holographic display in the center of the conference table. The risk exposure from the Singapore port acquisition is overstated, she said, her voice confident and clear. She was speaking in fluent formal Korean. Their primary distributor has political ties to the new administration, which their own internal analysis has failed to account for. We can leverage that. The real liability is here. She pointed to a secondary logistics partner. Their debt load is toxic. The room was filled with stone-faced Korean executives, senior members of Jiyoung's corporate empire. When she had first been appointed to run the new, legitimate global risk analysis division, they had been skeptical, hostile, a foreigner, a woman. Now they listened, their expressions a mixture of respect and fear. She had been right too many times to be ignored. Noah, his cheeks now full and rosy, burst into the office, followed by a giggling Maya. They were healthy. They were safe. A bone marrow match had been miraculously located through an international registry Jiyoung's network had suddenly gained access to. "Iyama, can we get ice cream?" Noah asked, wrapping his arms around her legs. Zora smiled, the cool strategist melting away to reveal the loving mother. "As soon as I'm done conquering the world, sweetie. Give me 10 minutes. Jiyoung appeared in the doorway, a soft smile on his face. It was a rare expression, one reserved only for her and the children. He held 2 cups of tea. He walked over, handed one to her, and placed a small object on her desk, a miniature dragon, intricately carved from a single piece of dark jade. It was the symbol of the Kwan family, the emblem of the dragon head. "You earned it," he said quietly, his voice full of a depth of feeling words could never capture. It was not a proposal. It was not a declaration of love. It was something more profound. It was recognition, acknowledgement. He was not giving her a place in his world. He was acknowledging the one she had carved out for herself, with her own hands, her own intellect, her own unbreakable will. She picked up the jade dragon, its surface cool and smooth against her skin. She looked from the symbol of his power to the faces of her children, then out at the sprawling city beyond the glass. She was not a guest here. She was not a consort or an asset. She was home, not in a place, but in the wholeness of herself, finally and fully seen. What would you endure for the ones you love? And what would you burn to the ground to protect them?